Hello everyone. I'm here again to do another review slash tutorial of one of my favorite games. This time we're going to be looking at Lords of Waterdeep. Now, this is my copy of Lords of Waterdeep. You might notice that it doesn't have the same cover. What happened is I bought the expansion called Scoundrels of Skullport, and I used the top of the Scoundrels of Skullport box on the original Lords of Waterdeep box itself, just to have a nicer cover for the box. This is a game distributed by Wizards of the Coast, and we're going to take a look at it today. One of my favorite games, Dungeons & Dragons theme, so it can perhaps be used to introduce board games to a Dungeons & Dragons crowd, and it's also a worker placement game, very good worker placement game, which is a very popular style of game based on the Euro board gaming tradition. So let's switch over to the Tabletop Simulator board here. We will be using Tabletop Simulator just to save myself some board space. So this is basically what the board will look like. It's already set up and ready to go, except for a couple of things. Depending on the number of players, you're going to have different amounts of what we call agents listed here. This will be the same number as the number of players, and I'll get into that in a second. So let's talk about the game. What is a worker placement game? Well, you'll notice on the board that there are these little spots here that look like what we call meeples. They're very, very similar to these things here. Those are spots on the board where you can actually place characters, your agents, to be able to activate those spots. And when you activate those spots, you get the benefit of what the spot is going to give you. All right? So let's say I was going to take a meeple and place it on the Grinning Lion Tavern. I would actually get the benefit of 2 black resources. Resources are basically different types of currency that you're going to use to be able to buy whatever you need to buy in the game. There are different types of currencies. Each one of these models represents the type of currency, and what's interesting in this game is the currency is actually characters in a role-playing game. So you have rogues, you have clerics, you have fighters, and you have wizards. Now in the base game, you don't actually get these models as your representations of those things. Usually they're just cubes, and you can see the cubes over here on the board. So usually that's all you get in the box. I actually upgraded my pieces to look more like these models instead. It just add a little bit more flavor to the game. So like I was saying, the currency for a lot of the things you're going to be buying are role-playing game characters. And the idea is you're hiring these characters to go out on missions to be able to complete quests, actually, and to bring back the rewards for those quests. There is actually money in the game as well. Money is represented by these 2 models here. Each one of these is 5 gold each, and each one of these is 1 gold. Okay? So you have your quests up here. These are the quest cards. So what we're going to do as part of the setup is we're going to pull out 4 of these quests, which will allow me to explain what they look like. So the different quests have different requirements to complete, and then they have rewards attached to them. So this is telling you that to complete this quest, you need to have 2 fighters, 2 wizards, 4 coins, and if you complete it, your reward will be 9 points and 2 clerics. So points in this game are represented by these red hexagons here with a number inside them. So anytime you see that symbol, that is actually representing a point value for the game. points are tracked along the outer edge of the board, as most normal board games of this type are. And you will see those points in crystal form down here as well. So let's talk about how to win the game. The person at the end of 8 rounds, and these are piles that are going to be tracking the round, and I'll get to why they're piles in a second. But there are 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So after 8 rounds, the game ends, which is pretty nice because that means the game actually has an internal timer. And whoever has the most points at that point wins. So you'll be putting your point tracker along the outside of the board, and whoever is the highest will win the game. So the majority of the points are going to be gotten through quests. Okay, so you have to be able to get your points by completing quests. Everybody's going to start the game with a certain amount of quests and a certain amount of intrigue cards. So what are the intrigue cards? Well, intrigue cards are cards you can play for multiple different reasons. Some of them are going to be to attack your fellow game players, and some of them are just going to benefit you. Some of them are going to benefit everybody. So this is just a sample of what type of thing you're going to have here. It says, assign one of your unused agents to a building in Builder's Hall. You immediately use the effect of that building as though you controlled it. So what is Builder's Hall? Well, there's a bunch of tiles here that are going to represent buildings. And buildings are going to come out at the beginning of the game, and they're going to get replaced as they get bought. And these are just other spaces that if you choose to build it, so if you put an agent on this spot, you're activating Builder's Hall. It says choose one building, pay its cost, and put it into play. Putting it into play just means placing it here on one of these spaces, and if those spaces get filled, you can actually put them off to the side of the board. There's technically no limit to the amount of buildings you can have on the board in play. So just to look at what this type of building does, it says when purchased and at the start of each round, place a wizard on this space. And then if somebody comes and visits this spot later on, they'll be able to take all of the wizards from this space. This one here says, if you put an agent here, you receive a cleric and you take one face-up quest. So the quests that we placed up here, this would be one way that you could actually get one of those quests. This one here just basically gives you 2 wizards and 2 fighters and a wizard. All right. So this card would allow you to assign one of your agents, one of your unused agents, to a building in Builder's Hall as though you controlled it. You immediately use the effect of the building as though you controlled it. So so that means you'd actually be able to get the reward without actually having to buy them. Now the cost for buying these buildings is in the top left corner right here. So the buildings can range quite a bit in cost. Okay, so that's one example of an intrigue card. Let's just take a look at another one here. You'll get these at the beginning of the game, so I figure we should probably go over them right now just to make sure you kind of have an idea as to what they do. So choose one of the following from the supply. So you could have 4 coins, 2 fighters, 2 rogues, 1 wizard, or 1 cleric. Now you may have noticed a bit of a pattern here when it comes to getting the resources of your role-playing or campaign characters that you're going to send on quests. Wizards and clerics are actually 2 of the least common resources to get, so people are going to be fighting over those 2 spots quite a bit. The wizards in particular, in my experience, have been the ones that are the most difficult to get. So being able to get a wizard from a card like this would actually help quite a bit. Let's look at, that's just another one of those. So here's an attack one. Each opponent removes 1 rogue from his or her tavern and returns it to the supply. For each opponent that could not do so, take 2 coins from the supply and place it in your tavern. So there's a few of those attack cards. There's other cards that'll give you things. I'm trying to find a specific type. Let me see here. Right here. So this is what's called a mandatory quest. As you are going to be completing quests throughout the game, somebody could say, hey, you're beating me, and pick one of these up in the intrigue cards, and basically it puts a mandatory quest on that person. So you can play this on somebody else, and that opponent cannot complete any other quests until this quest is completed. So it does steal some of their resources away, which will slow them down a little bit, but it does also give them points, but it's not a very big amount of points. So those are intrigue cards. Like I said, you'll get a couple of those at the beginning of the game. You get a couple of quests at the beginning of the game as well, just to get you started. So what does a typical round look like? So let me go over to my corner here. You'll notice that I have 2 agents, all right, to start. So what I'm also going to have is I'm going to have one of these Lord cards. These are distributed at the beginning of the game as well. And each Lord card gives a different benefit at the end of the game in points based on what they are asking you to get. So for instance, at the end of the game, this Lord will score you 4 points for each Arcana quest and each Warfare quest that you completed. So if we look at the quests, you'll see that some of them are labeled Arcana, Piety, Skullduggery. There's some that are also going to be, there's another Arcana one, there's another Skullduggery one, there's a Commerce one, which is different, there's a Warfare one. So those are all of the different types of quests that you can encounter during the game. And the Lords will each have some of their preferences, all right? So this one is Arcana and Warfare, and will give you 4 points for each one. At the end of the game, you score 4 points for each Arcana quest and each Skullduggery quest. At the end of the game, you score 4 points for each Commerce quest and each Piety quest. At the end of the game, you score 6 points for each building you control. So this Lord happens to work on buildings more than anything else. At the end of the game, you score 4 points for Commerce and Skullduggery, Piety and Skullduggery. So each Lord is going to have a slightly different demand of you to give you extra points at the end of the game. So let's say we had this Lord, and they are face down on the table, on a physical table. It says place down under your playmat. So for this game, they'd be face down so your opponents wouldn't know which quests you were going for. So this would give me some ideas to what kind of quests I'd be wanting. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the game, I'm just going to shuffle this up. You'd actually have a couple of quests to get you started. So I'm just going to place them here. Oops. And it does say active quests. There is no penalty for not completing quests, so if the 2 at the beginning of the game don't match your Lord, you don't have to finish them. As you see, I have a Piety quest here, and this Lord is asking for Arcana and Commerce. I do have a Commerce quest given to me, so that would be something that I'd be interested in getting the requirements for, to be able to get the reward for. For the Piety one, I could choose to do it or not, and it wouldn't matter because it doesn't give me, if I do it, it gives me the reward, but if I don't do it, it doesn't take away any points at the end of the game. So what do you do on your turn? Well, what's nice about this game is your turns go pretty quickly. All that you do is place one of your meeples, one of your agents, out on the board, and then you can choose to complete a quest, and that's it. Those are the only 2 things you can do on your turn. So if you look at the Commerce requirements, I need fighters, rogues, wizards, and clerics. I also need $4. Now, you also start the game with a certain amount of money. Let me just go to the rule book here quickly. So the rule book, let's just take a look at it quickly here. So here are the credits of the design team, so you can see who designed the game. Like I said, it was distributed by Wizards of the Coast. If we go to the end of the rule book, most rule books are listed or are set up this way. There's often a rules reference at the end of the rule book. And if we look at the setup, this is one thing that I always forget and have to look over, but it's right in the setup here. You are going to be placing a first player. Once that first player has been decided, the starting player gets 4 gold each player receives 1 more gold than the player to his or her right until all players have received starting gold. So the first player gets 4, then 5, then 6, then 7, then 8, depending on how many players are playing. Okay. We can take a look at final scoring while we're at it. So here's how you can gain points throughout the game. Each adventurer in your tavern will give you 1 victory point. So the adventurers are the little cubes or the models that I showed you earlier. Each one of those in your tavern will give you 1 victory point, so that's one way of getting points. You don't get a lot of points, obviously, 1 per, but near the end of the game, when you're all fighting to get those last few points, a lot of people will try to get as many of those as possible. Every 2 gold in your tavern, rounded down, is 1 victory point. So you count up your amount of gold, divide by 2, round down, and that'll tell you how many victory points you get for that. Again, not a great way of getting victory points. It's even worse than the adventurers, but it's going to give you a few extra points. Your Lord card, and obviously all of the points that you've accumulated through completing your quests throughout the game. Okay, so as I was saying, you do start the game with a certain amount of money. Let's say we started with 4 gold, and this is where it tells you your actions in a turn, right? You assign an agent, which means put an agent out on the board, and then you can choose to complete a quest if you so wish. Let's go back to the main board here. So let's give ourselves 4 gold as if we were the first player. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I actually have the 4 gold required to complete this commerce. Again, remember, I'm trying to do a commerce one because that's what my Lord is asking me to do. So what I'm missing are my my party of adventurers. All right, so I need these 4 different colors. As I mentioned, the hardest colors to get are white and purple, the wizard and the cleric. So I would look at the board and say, okay, where can I go to get a wizard and a cleric? Well, Blackstaff Tower will give you a wizard, sorry. The plinth will give you a cleric. So I could go to either of those places. All right, so let's say I take my agent, put him on Blackstaff Tower, usually put him right on that spot, and then I can take a wizard, put him in my holding area, which is called the tavern. Okay, so you can put all of your pieces into your tavern, and then it would be the next player's turn because I can't complete a quest. All right, so this person would have 5 gold, this person would have 6 gold, this person would have 7 gold. So let's just go around the table and see the types of things that people might want to do. So I'm going to search for the person who likes buildings, and I'm going to give that Lord to this person here, the second player. We're only going to do a 4-player game. This game does play 6 with the expansions, but we're just going to play a 4-player game. So we're going to say, that this person's Lord is the one that likes buildings. All right. Well, with $5 or 5 gold, is there a building that this person could buy? And there certainly is. And probably the best one to buy would be the one that is going to give wizards, because wizards are, like I said, hard to get in this game. Now, if you own a building, the owner of the building, anytime somebody comes and visits it, will get a specific reward. The owner cannot get both of these things if the owner themselves visits their building. But if somebody else visits the building, they always get the reward that says for the owner here. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go to Builder's Hall. So the red player will put their meeple on Builder's Hall. We'll choose one of the buildings, put it in play. They'll pay for the building. That means they get 1 gold in return. And then they put their control marker on the board. So in the bag here, you get these control markers. They look like your symbol so that you know which person controls the building. And in the actual physical version of the game, there's a cutout in the corner of these little tiles, and you just fit that right into the cutout. But in the Tabletop Simulator version here, we can just put them in the corner to show that they belong to the red player. That person builds that building, you pull out another building right away and replace it. so that everybody can see the three possible buildings that could be purchased. Oh, and I forgot one thing. At the beginning of the game, you're actually going to put these 3 tokens out to show that the first round has commenced, all right? As soon as you buy a building, this would have been on the building that was purchased, right? That person has now gotten a point. So to show points, you take your marker and you put it on the point track and you move it up to show that that person has now gotten 1 point. All right. In fact, all the markers would already be in that position so that you could start marking your points off as you go. Okay. At the end of the round, you would actually put 1 more crystal on each one of these buildings. Now, as soon as somebody has taken up a spot, they normally cannot move from that spot. Therefore, nobody else can choose it. So you're blocking that spot off from anybody else. There are some intrigue cards that allow you to use spots that are taken by other people. But normally, as soon as you've taken a spot, that spot is blocked. All right. There's one spot here, and I'll talk about it in a second, that is has got 3 spaces, and we'll get back to that one in a second. So then play would go to this lord. At the end of the game, you score 4 points for each Arcana quest and each Piety quest you complete. So they did get an Arcana quest, so that's probably the one that they would go for. Now they might not like that quest because it's such low points. So let's go take a look at some of the quests that are on the board here. Now this is the only Arcana quest that's here, but it is worth 9 points. Now this is called Cliffwatch Inn. This is where you come usually to get your quests. Notice that there are 3 spots on this place as well. That's because there's a different option for each one. If you place your agent in the first spot, this tells you to pick up one of the face-up quests and get $2. This one tells you to pick up the face-up quest, one of the face-up quests, and also you are able to draw an intrigue card. So this is a way to get extra intrigue cards. This one says reset the quests, then choose one of the face-up quests. So this player might not like any of the quests that they have. So they would take their agent, let's say, and put their agent right here. They would reset, which means discard all of these quests, take out 4 more. We're looking for Piety and Arcana, right? If you look back at our Lord, we're looking for Piety and Arcana. So we just saw a Piety card come out. It's got 5 points. So it's not the best card, but let's take that one because it is worth at least 5 points. And we'll just put it here. There's no limit to the amount of active quests you can have. And then you replace that card right away for other people to take a look at it. Okay. Now you can see this one here is a 20-point quest. It does take a lot of resources, however, to get it. So you'd be working on this one a little while, but it might be a worthwhile one to go for because it's worth 20 points. Okay. Now notice because that person took this spot, there's still 2 other open spots to be able to get more quests, right? So let's give the next player 2 intrigue cards, because I want to show you how to play an intrigue card. This person would also have 2 quests and a lord. Remember, the lords are all face down, but we're just keeping them face up so we can see what they say. So this person got a utility card that says, these are intrigue cards. These would be in your hand, hidden from other players. Notice that this one is the same one that we saw earlier, and actually both of these are the same that we saw earlier. How would you play an intrigue card? Well, in order to play an intrigue card, you have to go to Waterdeep Harbor. It's the only spot where you're allowed to play an intrigue card. Okay? So let's take that person's agent, put him on that spot. You always take the spots from left to right. and that says play an intrigue card. So this person's lord is looking for commerce and warfare quests. Well, we got a commerce quest already, and you'll notice that it does require a wizard, but it also requires 4 rogues. So on the board, you can only get 2 rogues from the Grinning Lion Tavern. So this person's going to say, you know what, I'm going to be able to get a wizard another time. I'm going to actually get 2 rogues to help me complete this commerce quest. So because they played on Waterdeep Harbor, they're going to take the card that's going to allow them to get those 2 rogues. They'll put it out as a discard, and then they'll take their 2 rogues. Put them in their tavern. So now they're at least halfway to getting all their rogues that they need for that quest. Now, the thing is, at Waterdeep Harbor, at the end of the round, these agents are going to be able to be put back out on the board in another spot. Because all you're doing is playing an intrigue card here, to encourage you to come here and do so, you get another turn with that agent at the end of the round. All right. So you have to remember to check Waterdeep Harbor before you say we're finishing the round, for those players to play again with, and that just means taking their agent and putting them somewhere else. I'll finish another round here. So let me finish distributing all of the cards that everybody would need. Those would have been all dealt out at the beginning of the game. By the way, if you're ever wondering whose turn it is, all you have to do is look at all the color of meeples and see how many of them there are. Since all 4 colors have been played, it has to be the first player's turn again. And there is a first player marker. This is the first player marker right here. Now, being first player in this game is actually pretty important, because it means you get to pick from a fresh board each turn, each round, with no restrictions as to where you want to go. So there is a place to steal the first player. You may have seen it as we were going around. See how this symbol matches the model for the first player token. So if a person comes here, they can steal the first player token from that player. For instance, the blue player here probably would want to do that at some point, because they're last. So they're always choosing last where they want to go. Okay. But let's take a look at this person's intrigue cards. We had already read that card, so each opponent removes 1 black from his or her tavern and returns it to the supply. For each opponent that could not do so, take 2 gold from the supply and place it in your tavern. So that would be a pretty good card to play right now if you needed money, because very few people have rogues in their taverns. I believe they're the only player that does. Okay, so you could get some money by doing that, and you would also be attacking that player. However, just to show you some other things that you can do in the game, just to make sure that we cover all of our bases here. So we've already seen how to get the different resources. It's pretty simple, right? The rogues, the cleric, the wizard, and the warrior. We've also seen how to build a building. So let's say this player decides that they want... Oh, and you know what? We forgot to do one thing when we put out this card. When played, that card is supposed to get a wizard on it, right? And at the beginning of the round, it's also supposed to get another wizard. So there should be 2 wizards on this token. Well, that might be a little bit hard to pass up. So this player is going to go to that spot. That player gets these 2 wizard model tokens. They now have 3 wizards in their tavern. That might not be the best play for their quests, by the way. I'm just showing you that this is what happens if you play on somebody else's building. So the owner of that building, which is red, shown by their color, is going to get an intrigue card. So they just get to draw another intrigue card, like that, when that happens. Okay? Now that's done. That player has finished. All right? So this player... bought a building, right? That's what they were trying to do. They cannot buy another building because they have themselves blocked off that spot. So let's check their intrigue cards to see if something would allow them to do something else. Oh, so this is an interesting play here. So take 2 wizards from the supply and place them in your tavern. Choose one opponent. That opponent takes 1 wizard from the supply. So this is a way that you're helping yourself, but you're also going to help somebody else. This is the exact same thing except for clerics instead of wizards. And then take $4 from the supply. Each opponent can choose to pay $4, to pay you $4 once to score 4 points. So if somebody had a lot of money, that would be a good time to play that. Just to show you what can happen here, let's say that this person decides to go here, Castle Waterdeep. So they get first player. So they just stole the first player token from that person. They'll be the first player to go next turn, and nobody else can steal it because right now it is blocked, right? They also get an intrigue card. So this person's going to get another intrigue card, which isn't bad for the person who's going for buildings because they don't have the issue of particularly needing specific quests. So if they get a few more intrigue cards, they might be able to do something with them later on. So this one says draw a quest from the deck equal to the number of, so draw quest cards from the deck equal to the number of players. Keep 1 and pass the remaining quest cards to the player on your left. Each player in turn chooses 1 and keeps passing the rest to the left until every player has taken a quest card. So this is basically giving everybody a quest card for free, but it's random off the deck. And we haven't seen anybody complete a quest yet, so let's do that. What happens when somebody completes a quest? So it's Green's turn. Now, Green's Lord was wanting Arcana and Piety, right? So let's say that Green's Lord ended up having, through gameplay, a fighter and 2 wizards in their tavern. All right. So that's the requirement along with $2, but they already have the $2. They had that from their starting amount of coins, or gold, I should say, instead of dollars. So the first thing Green would do is play. So let's say they played here to get $4 more. Okay, just to make sure they have enough money and in case they need more money later on. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so they have played their agent. The next thing they can do is complete a quest. So how do you complete a quest? Well, it's this simple. You return your models of your RPG units back to the board, and then you just say, I'm completing this quest. Oh, and you have to pay the $2 as well. And you just say, I'm completing this quest. Now, this is a special type of quest. You'll notice that it says plot quest in the bottom here, bottom corner, okay? This one does as well, but this card does not. So plot quests are special because they give you a perpetual reward that keeps going throughout the game, okay? So the reward is 6 points. So the first thing Green is going to do is take their marker, move it 6, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then it says whenever you take an action that provides any wizards, you also get to draw an intrigue card. So those quests, I'm just going to move my intrigue cards over here. Those quests, it says completed plot quests on this side, you just move them over to that side of the table, or of your player mat. And you have to keep track of those. You've got to make sure that you remember that you have that power in perpetuity now. Okay, so whenever that happens, you can get a reward. If you had completed a quest that's not a plot quest, you just take it, flip it down after you've taken your points and read all the reward conditions. You just place it here. And at the end of the game, you're going to go through these, and you're going to check to see which one of them matches your lord, and this lord's going to give you 4 points extra for each one of those. So let's talk about the end of the round. There's a few things that you have to do at the end of the round. Once blue plays their last agent, so let's say blue places their agent here and takes a cleric. The first thing you do is you take a look at Waterdeep Harbor. So Waterdeep Harbor has a token on it, or has an agent on it. That agent gets to play again. Okay, so you can place that agent on any space that's not covered already. So let's say that the blue player decides to go here and take 2 fighters. Okay, so then if there was a second player on Waterdeep Harbor, they'd do the same thing. If there was a third player on Waterdeep Harbor, they'd do the same thing. Then what you do is you say, okay, the round is officially ended. We're going to put 3 more crystals out here, which tracks how many rounds have been played. Okay. And then we start the next, and then we take back all of our agents. So you have to clear the board. So every player would take all of their agents back in preparation for the next round. Okay. And now the board is fresh again. But now it's the first player who's going to go based on the first player token, and that would be the red player this time. So now the white player is going to be the last to go. Now, every time you finish a round, you're going to put out these again, right? And let me go to the rule book. And right here, I want you to take a look at the picture. Every player is going to get 1 extra agent at that point. And that means you'll have 3 agents to play with during those next rounds instead of just 2. Now, the number of agents you have depends on the number of players. If you have 2 players, it's 4 agents per player. If you have 3 players, it's 3 agents per player. If you have 4 players, it's 2 agents per player. If you have 5, it's 2. If you have 6, it's 2. Now, we don't see the 6th player here because this is just the base game so far. Okay, so on this board, does 5 have a special symbol? It does not. So 5 doesn't have a special symbol showing you that you would get your next token. However, it does say it right here. In the 5th round, all players receive one additional agent. Okay, so you would just take that agent off of that spot. You would put it on your board. And now everybody would have a 3rd agent to play with for every round consecutive to that one. Okay. So that makes the board a little bit tighter at that point because you're going to run out of spaces a lot quicker. So being the first player is going to be a little bit more important at that point. And that's basically the instructions for the base game. Now let's look at the expansions quickly. So there are 3 expansions to the game that are covered by these things here. And they are in the Scoundrels of Skullport expansion that you can get for the game. Okay? So I just want to take these off of the board. The main one that I wanted to discuss is the corruption track. All right? There are some differences in setup as well, but I'm going to leave those instructions for you to read in the rule book if you ever buy the expansion. Basically what happens is you get a whole new deck of intrigue cards, a whole new deck of quest cards, and you have to take out, and a whole new deck of buildings. You have to take out a certain amount of quest cards, a certain amount of intrigue cards, and a certain amount of buildings, and replace them with some of the cards from each one of those new decks, including the building deck. And that just, you shuffle them in and it just gives you a few new decks. And you can change them because there's a lot more than you need. So you can replace, mix and match them as many times as you want and get very different games. The main and probably most liked expansion is the Corruption Track Skullport expansion, which also comes with the Skullport board here. All right. Now let's talk about the Corruption Track. There are going to be certain cards that are going to ask you to take corruption. Now, corruption is worth a negative amount of points at the end of the game. So it says it right here. Take corruption tokens from the -1 space, or if that space is empty, the closest space to it that contains tokens. So once that one's empty, you would start taking corruption tokens off of the next one. And now at the end of the game, anybody that have corruption tokens, you keep these in your tavern. At the end of the game, if somebody had 4 corruption tokens in their tavern, they'd now be worth -2 points. And if this one goes, then it'd be -3 points and -4 points. Now there are cards that allow you to get corruption back into the corruption track, and as long as there's one skull in that space, it's the space before it that tells you how many points you're going to lose at the end of the game for having corruption. Well, if these are worth -1 points, why would you even want to get corruption in the first place? Well, that's based on the Skullport expansion right here. The Skullport expansion, which is attached to the corruption track, gives you these 3 new spaces to go to, and they're pretty powerful. You can get 2 fighters, 2 rogues, and a corruption token if you go to the Slaver's Market. You can get a quest card, an intrigue card, 5 gold, and a corruption token. You could get 2 of any kind of characters for your questing. Wizard, warrior, cleric, rogue. You can get 2 of any kind and a corruption token. So these are really powerful places to go with your agents, but they also give you a negative when you go there. There are certain cards in the corruption, in the Skullport expansion, that also give you corruption, but they're very, very powerful cards, both intrigue and quest cards. So I don't want to, spoil too much by showing you all of those different cards and buildings and stuff, but that is why you might want corruption. You can also play with the Undermountain expansion, which basically, along with the buildings cards and cards for intrigue and quests, it gives you these extra 3 spaces. Now, in my experience, if you're playing with 6 players in this game, it is actually important to play with both of these, okay? The Undermountain spots are also pretty powerful, but the biggest thing with the Undermountain expansion is you will get some quest cards that rewards here, like 20, will be small compared to some of the rewards in the Undermountain expansion, which can go up to like 40 points. The requirements are quite big, but you can get an awful amount of points, an awful big amount of points with them. So the Undermountain expansion, if you want cards with big rewards, the Skullport expansion, if you want to play a little bit risky with corruption and potentially, lose a lot of points at the end of the game. For the corruption track, there are some cards that permanently remove skulls from the corruption track, so sometimes you'll never get back to -1 by adding them back. So it can get pretty exciting and tension-filled if you use the Scoundrels of Skullport expansion. And I believe I've pretty much covered as much as you need to be able to play the game. Obviously, check the rulebook. Make sure you read the rulebook correctly. At least one player should know how to play by having read the rulebook first. But you can pick up a lot of the rules by playing through the game with just the explanations that I've given you here, and checking the rulebook when you need to see what you're missing. So, one of my favorite games, it's probably one of the first games that I ever purchased. It is still a very popular game to this day, probably because of the Dungeons & Dragons theme, allows players who like board games to attract players who like Dungeons & Dragons to play with them, and have a good time around the table. So, hope you enjoyed my tutorial and review. Till next time, folks, see you later.